So I think it's safe to say that if Wayne was to play an RPG or any game similar to, Skyrim with all its individual trees that you can upgrade, whether it's swordplay, bow and arrow, speech, I think the first thing he would max out, he wouldn't even need to worry about combat. He would max that speech out and somehow find a way to navigate every death scene that should kill him and turn it into a political win, even if it's not something he necessarily wants. The number of times you see him in just such a sticky predicament. I mean, even when a sword's pointed at him, and you see the visible concern of Nim being like, this is actually going to be the point that his arrogance is going to get him killed. And he comes out of there alive and well. And that's why, despite having these holy elites, right? I mean, they're up to no good. I mean, we literally cut off the arm of one of the sisters over here, who very much seems indebted to him and just will do whatever it takes for revenge. And the idea of just slaughtering the remaining force is like the brutality and savagery of this show. It's kind of unmatched in military might right now, and I absolutely adore it. But I love how the way he comes out of these sticky predicaments, it's not like left field, like the way he talks to people, despite having a level of arrogance. I think people generally come out like thinking, I can trust in this guy, even though internally he's thinking to himself, how in the actual hell can I get out of this and not have to do that much work? And it's really, really fun seeing an episode like this where we have to basically die Nim Terror, right? Because we know her people are looked down upon, they're very much pushed back against. And the fact that Nim is kind of like the right-hand woman of Wayne, I mean, she's obviously going to go where he goes. And just to have like such casual flirting in the first, I think it was like 6 minutes, give or take. They did the same thing that they've done a couple of times before, where the opening song's like not even there, they're just overlaying the general credits, the staff credits, as you have them in the carriage there, just kind of flirting, having fun, bickering about hair color, like which color he'd like better, him trying to turn it around, saying it was about panties, he gets a slap in the face. It's just wholesome, horny fun, and it's really, really solid to then ease you into an actual pretty tense episode. Like, Zeno is a character who we really get front and center in this episode, and I immediately enjoyed the personality, because there was something about, like, this kind of strong-headed nature, but had a general fear that kind of felt like it was there front and center, but as the episode progressed more and more, especially when she tried to assassinate the person who she felt wronged her and her people so much, to them literally having to be held back by Nim with a knife to her throat, to then ultimately just kind of like sitting in the background there as Wayne is talking to this delusional crazy sister. And honestly, if you're not shitting your pants in moments like those, goddamn, you have some pretty strong control over your bowel movements, because that shit is kind of horrifying. When you have someone who's normally in any other world or situation would be like, a voice of reason, is talking about some crazy ass shit that I don't want to be anywhere near. And I really enjoy how when he gets thrown into situations that I think are arguably bad for him, because the entire motto and mantra of this man is, I want to sell my kingdom and have a leisurely life. And he gets thrown into the thick of it further and further and further. And when he kind of feels like he's getting a bone thrown to him, like the idea that the gold mine that originally he thought was worthless, now we're looking for new veins, right? I mean, it's very much turning into a profitable location for them. And I mean, if you eventually want to sell off your kingdom, having something like a worthwhile gold mine, I mean, that's something that would add on the value. So he's pretty happy. But then the idea of basically getting thrown into the holy elites because, his bloodline goes so far back that it actually works in his favor, it's something that he's obviously freaking out about. But he immediately, instead of just throwing a temper tantrum and leaving it at that, he throws a temper tantrum, but then's like, actually, it's not the worst thing ever. I could probably use it in my advantage. And I'm like, that's what I love about him, is that he has such childish natures about him, and very much Nim is kind of like his pillow in those moments to kind of like let it all out, get the frustration out. But then he'll turn into this tactical mad genius who can pick up a sword and cut off arms and take lives need be, but most of the time he won't need to even draw his blade because his maneuverability with his vocabulary can literally solve most things. And when he does get caught off guard, it's nice to see how genuinely shocked he is, like when he gets thrown into that room of all these powerful kind of religious figures, and he's like, I don't know what to do in this moment. And the fact that he kept his cool as long as he did is, power to him at that point. Like, the Genius Prince has had a decent amount of action if you take in the first couple of episodes and then, like, the ambush last week and whatnot. But overall, most of it has been characters talking and basically planning in a military style. And those types of stuff are always fun to me, but I often see people like get bored of those, like it's not enough for them. They want like a constant string of action or funny. But it's really great to see the kind of following that the Genius Prince has kind of built up, because I think when you really do look at its central character and the surrounding characters around it, the way they can casually reveal information, like with the sister's kind of like teachings, right? Her schooling. It acts as info dump without it feeling like boring info dump, especially with the beautiful art style that they use. Like in this episode, there was a good 3 or 4 shots where they were like explaining history, and it almost gave me like an Eastern take on a Western design in terms of like the storytelling approach that it used. It was really great art design, and it just makes it interesting to follow, because even though it technically is just exposition and revealing more world history, the way it's being explained to a kid, all things considered, makes it easy to digest, give enough kind of like information so it's not shallow, but it's not so overly complex. They're trying to be the next Tolkien here or anything like that. And then with the good art style and presentation, I mean, it's hard not to be interested in learning more about this world, especially when we're learning about something, it always relates to the episode or the episode coming up in question. Like, this show is just absolutely remarkable. It is like we're now halfway through it in its first core, and honestly, when you really take a step back, I honestly feel like what we've experienced in these 6 episodes, a lot of times, like, that's the amount of substance you might get in a 12-episode anime, but stretched out, obviously, over those 12 episodes. So maybe, like, you'll have, I don't know, he gets a sword thrown in his face, and he outmaneuvers that situation, and he kind of gains an ally for the road. But then the rest of the episode would just be boring fluff and, you know, what you could call filler. But everything about their world and the interactions feels like if you were to remove anything, even the generic kind of like simple carriage scene at the beginning, it further shows how close they are, even though they do bicker and sometimes get into physical arguments. Ultimately, Nim and Wayne have a very strong relationship. If you don't continue to remind us of that, it's very easy to forget when other pretty female characters come along and we're like, oh, maybe he'd be better off with her. No, we remember because they constantly tell us, and if a character is in love with another character, they should constantly show that. It's not like a one-time thing, right? Which anime often get wrong. And that kind of goes for every element about it, whether it's the internal freakouts of Wayne to then turning those freakouts into a win. The idea of just casually revealing those giant cliffhangers like Nim being able to read lips, and then the idea that, you know, her prince is in grave trouble, and even though for her that's probably something very, very bad, Wayne's probably going to turn that into a win, all things considered. Absolutely love this show. It's fantastic, it's well written, it's hilarious when it counts, and honestly, it just throws twists and turns in ways you don't see coming but always feel natural for the type of story that it's aiming to tell. Thoughts and feelings on this episode, where you think that cliffhanger is going to go next week? Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. Till next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.